Hello, and welcome back to Veil Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales veiled in noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1, hey everyone, it's Josh again. Last time I told you I found some old 4chan threads about people hearing a wailing man in the woods. Since then, I've been digging even deeper, and now I'm finding something else that feels just as strange. There are posts in old articles about people becoming obsessed with their fire pits and campfires. I don't mean they just liked sitting around the fire. I mean they became completely locked onto it, like they couldn't look away, couldn't move, couldn't think about anything else. Some of them even attacked anyone who tried to pull them away. The weirdest part is that many of these stories are old. Some are from years ago, but I swear I never heard of them before. One article was about an old woman who sat in front of her fire for hours. Her cat came up to her, hungry and rubbing against her leg, and she suddenly grabbed it and threw it straight into the flames. The cat survived. It ran away and managed to put the fire out, though it had burns. The woman did not survive. When police arrived later, they found her dead with her head burned in the fire. The article said she was smiling. Another report was from more than 10 years ago. It was about a hiker who got lost in the woods. Search teams looked for him for weeks. When they finally found him, he was sitting beside a campfire. His eyes were dried out, and he had cut off his own eyelids. Somehow, he was still alive. Something is wrong here. I'm into true crime and missing person cases, especially all that missing 411 kind of stuff. I should have heard at least one of these stories before, but all of this is new to me. First, I found stories about a wailing man in the woods, and now I'm finding stories about strange campfires. So I'm going to try a little experiment. I searched for everything I could about this next story, wrote it down, and took pictures. If new details appear later, or if the story changes, then we'll know something is really going on. For someone who grew up in a small rural town and spent most of his life outside, you might think I would love fishing. The truth is, I never cared for it that much. I don't hate fishing. Every now and then, I can enjoy sitting beside a pond at night, catching a few small fish, and cooking them over a fire. There is something peaceful about that. But if I'm being honest, I usually find fishing boring. I understand why other people love it, though, especially in a place like Lockwood. Lockwood has some of the best fishing around. Loch Mackenzie is full of different kinds of fish, and the rivers are famous for fly fishing. Every weekend, people come from all over to fish there. Some are old men who have been doing it their whole lives. Some are kids holding fishing rods bigger than they are. Almost everyone leaves with at least one bite or one story to tell. But because of the fog, there are strict rules about how long guests are allowed to stay out near the water. The fog at Lockwood is not normal. It can roll in fast, even on a warm day. It can cover the trees, the river, the trails, and the lake until you can't see your own hands clearly. People who stay out too long in that fog have a habit of not coming back. There is an old story people tell about why fishing in the fog is dangerous. Decades ago, when Lockwood was still new, an old fisherman came out to enjoy the lake. He had once worked there long before he retired, so he knew the rules better than most people. But he was stubborn. He took a boat out onto Loch Mackenzie, even though the fog was already heavy. He also refused to wear a life jacket. That day, the fog was so thick you could barely see 2 feet in front of you. He should never have gone onto the water. Along the edge of the lake, 2 young counselors had been fishing for hours. They were not paying attention to the sounds of the old man's boat moving somewhere out in the mist. One of them cast his line as far as he could. The hook flew through the fog and landed on the collar of the old man's jacket. The counselor felt the line catch on something. Before the old man could shout or stop him, the boy jerked the pole back hard. The hook pulled the old man off balance and dragged him into the lake. The 2 counselors heard yelling and splashing, but instead of running to help, they panicked. They were afraid they would get in trouble, so they ran back to their cabins. They never realized the old man couldn't swim. He drowned that night. The only people who could have saved him left him behind in the fog. Weeks later, after police narrowed down where he might have gone missing, they searched the lake and found his body. His skin had been torn by fishhooks. He had drifted and caught on lines and hooks beneath the water until he looked like something dragged from the bottom of a nightmare. Since then, people say that when the fog rolls in, fishermen must beware. The old fisherman in the fog is still searching for the 2 boys who left him to die. And if anyone gets in his way, he takes them too. Most people fish at Lockwood without any trouble. They follow the rules, leave before the fog gets bad, and come home safe. But over the years, many people have gone missing near the lakes and rivers. Their fishing gear is usually found left behind, but they are not. Peter and Caleb were not worried when they drove out that afternoon. Caleb loved fishing. He had been talking about this spot for weeks, saying it was hidden, quiet, and full of fish. Peter did not care nearly as much, but Caleb had finally talked him into coming along. "Got everything?" Caleb asked. Peter slammed the trunk shut and looked at him. Caleb looked like he had stepped out of a fishing magazine. He had the vest, the boots, the hat, the tackle box, and more gear than one person needed. Peter was wearing a t-shirt and sweatpants. "Yeah," Peter said. "Let's go." They left the truck and slipped into the trees. Above them, the sun tried to push through a thick gray sky, but the clouds were winning. Rain had fallen earlier, and the whole forest smelled wet and cold. The ground was soft with mud. Almost every step sank a little. Water dripped from the pine needles whenever the wind moved through the branches. Now and then, a gust would shake the trees and send cold droplets down on them. Caleb shivered when water ran down the back of his neck. Even though it was summer, the air felt cool. "I hate walking this far just to fish," Peter said. "It's not that far," Caleb replied. "And the fishing is good because nobody knows about this place. I don't want to park too close and have someone find it." "Whatever you say." They walked for about 15 minutes before the trees opened into a clearing. A river ran into a large, still pool, then spilled back into the river at the far end. Straight ahead, a rock ledge rose above the water. To the left of it, an old tree leaned over the pool, and a gray rope hung from one of its branches. Years ago, the place had been a secret swimming hole. Counselors used to hike there when they wanted to get away from camp, but nobody had used it in a long time, at least not until Caleb found it again. Near the edge of the pool sat an old picnic table, half rotted and sinking into the weeds. No one knew how it had gotten there. "All right, Pete," Caleb said, setting down his gear. "Let's catch dinner. I bet I catch more than you." "Yeah," Peter said. "I bet you do too. That's not the right attitude." Oh, right, if I think happy thoughts, the fish will bite more. That's the spirit. Sure, Peter opened a small plastic container and pulled out a nightcrawler. He pushed the hook through the worm's body. A brownish liquid squeezed from the hole, and the worm twisted helplessly. You ever feel bad for them? Peter asked. For what? The worms? Caleb gave him a look. Pete, they're worms. They don't have feelings. Yeah, but look at it. The worm kept trying to wriggle away, but there was nowhere for it to go. Caleb finished baiting his own hook and walked toward the water. Just don't think about it, he said. Caleb held the line with one hand, flipped the lock open with the other, and swung the rod back over his shoulder. Then, he cast it forward in one smooth motion. The hook flew out and landed near the middle of the pool. Peter tried to copy him. His worm landed only a few feet from shore. He looked at it for a second, then decided he did not care enough to cast again. A few minutes later, Caleb's rod bent. Ha! Already got one. He pulled up hard to set the hook and started reeling. A yellow perch broke through the surface, flashing in the gray light. Caleb grinned like a kid. Hey, little guy, he said. Have I caught you before? I don't think he speaks English, Peter said. You hear that, mister? Fish? Pete doesn't think you speak English. Dear God. Caleb laughed and reached for the fish. Well, let's get that hook out, and he stopped when he looked closer. Usually, Caleb was good at catching fish through the mouth, which made it easy to take the hook out. But this time, the hook was buried deep down the fish's throat. The perch flopped in his hand, fighting to get free. I hooked this one deep, Caleb said. You need pliers? No knife. Sometimes a deep hook can be saved, but not always. This fish was not going to make it. Peter handed Caleb the knife. Caleb cut the line, then tossed the fish into a bush far from the water. After that, he walked back to the picnic table to tie on another hook. Peter stayed by his own line, turning the reel a little every now and then to make the bait move. Suddenly, he felt a pull. For the first time that afternoon, he felt excited. I got something. He reeled fast, pulling his catch out of the water. It was a long stick. Nice, Caleb said. Stick fish. Yeah, and it ate my worm too. Peter threw the stick into the woods and grabbed another worm. Time passed slowly. Caleb kept catching fish. Peter caught almost nothing. The clouds stayed heavy, and the light began to fade. By the time evening came, Peter was tired and bored. He kept thinking about his couch, a warm shower, and anything that was not fishing. Caleb, on the other hand, still had energy. He had caught 13 fish by then. Peter had caught 2, trying to distract himself. Peter watched a blue jay hopping along the ground on the other side of the pool. It pecked at something in the mud, then flapped its wings and shot off to the right. Peter's eyes followed it. That was when he saw the fog. It rolled between the trees like a low white wall. At first, it looked thin and harmless, but it was moving fast. Peter felt a hard lump form in his chest. Hey, Caleb, he said. How long have we been out here? I don't know, Caleb said. The alarm hasn't gone off, so I think He stopped talking when he saw the fog. Caleb pulled out his phone. His face changed when he looked at the screen. There had been no alarm. The fog crept over the pool, covering half the water in seconds. Caleb, Peter said slowly, did you forget to set it? Caleb's voice dropped. Drop your pole and run. I thought we weren't supposed to run from this. What are you talking about? Let's go. The fog swallowed the entire pool. It became so thick that the water disappeared under it. Then it spread toward them, rolling over the mud and grass like smoke. God damn it, Peter, move. Peter took one last look at the pool. Just before he dropped his rod, he thought he saw a man standing far away in the fog. Tall, gray, still. Then he ran. He and Caleb rushed back onto the trail. The fog followed them through the trees, moving faster than fog should move. It flooded the forest, wrapping around trunks and bushes. Soon, Peter could barely see Caleb in front of him. "Wait up," Peter shouted. "Pete, hurry. What happens if we don't get out in time?" "I don't know," Caleb yelled back. "Just run." They ran for several minutes, but something was wrong. They should have reached the truck by now. The trail was straight. They had walked it only once, but it had not been hard to follow. Still, the same trees seemed to pass again and again. Peter slowed, breathing hard. "Caleb, we're running in circles. The trail is straight," Caleb said. "How could we be lost?" They stopped to catch their breath. The air had become colder. Peter could see his breath coming out in pale clouds. "It's getting freezing," Peter said. "Why is it so cold?" "I don't know." Caleb looked around. "I don't remember this part of the story." Then Caleb noticed a mark carved into a nearby tree. His face went pale. He knew that mark. It was near the entrance to the swimming hole. "We have been running in circles," he whispered. "Look." Peter looked at the tree. Then his eyes moved past Caleb's shoulder. His expression changed. "Caleb," he said, barely speaking. "Turn around." Caleb froze. For a few seconds, he could not make himself move. Then he slowly turned his head. Behind them, barely visible through the fog, stood the gray shape of a man. He reached behind his back and pulled out a fishing rod. Then he swung it over his shoulder and cast the line into the air. They heard something cut through the fog above them. The figure disappeared. "Pete," Caleb whispered. What was that? The two of them stared up into the gray sky. Somewhere above them, a rope creaked. Then they heard a small ticking sound behind them. They turned. A rusty hook was descending from the fog. It hung from a thin line that vanished into the white above. To their left, two more hooks came down. Then more appeared on their right. Hooks of every shape and size lowered slowly from the fog. Some had 1 point. Some had 2. Some had 3 sharp ends like claws. "Caleb," Peter said. "Run. Run where?" "I don't know. Just follow me." They ran down the trail again, weaving between the hanging hooks. The farther they went, the more hooks appeared. They swung gently in the air, close enough to brush their clothes. The trail stretched ahead, but somehow it led nowhere. Again and again, they passed the same trees, the same roots, the same bends. The truck never appeared. Caleb was so tired that he stopped watching his feet. His boot caught on a rock, and he fell hard into the mud. Peter kept running and vanished into the fog. "Pete!" Caleb shouted. "Wait!" He pushed himself up, but before he could stand, Peter came rushing back. He grabbed Caleb by the shoulders. "Caleb, are you okay?" "Yes," Caleb said, gasping. "I'm fine. We're going to get out of here," Peter said. "We're going to make it." As Peter spoke, Caleb noticed something strange in his mouth. Something shiny. "Pete," Caleb whispered. "What's in your mouth?" Peter stopped speaking. He stared straight into Caleb's eyes. Then his jaw slowly opened. "Peter?" Caleb said. "What's going?" A hook burst out of Peter's mouth and shot straight into Caleb's. It drove down his throat. Caleb gagged as the line snapped tight, and a sharp pain tore through his chest. Peter's body broke apart into fog. The real Peter came running out of the mist a second later. Caleb, he shouted. What's happening? A ticking sound came from above. The line in Caleb's mouth began to rise. Caleb grabbed at his throat. Help me. Jesus Christ, help me. Peter rushed to him. How deep is it? Caleb's eyes filled with panic. I can feel it in my chest. Get it out. The knife, Peter said. It's in the tackle box. It's back there. I'll be right back. Peter ran toward the clearing as fast as he could. Behind him, Caleb choked and screamed. The line kept pulling upward. By the time Peter returned with the knife, the line was nearly straight. Hurry, Caleb cried. Hold on. Peter grabbed the fishing line and pressed the blade against it. He tried to cut through. Fishing line was usually easy to break with a sharp knife, but this line would not cut. The blade slid over it as if it were made of wire or glass or something stronger than both. What the hell? Peter said. Caleb screamed. The hook pulled deeper. His heels began to lift from the ground. Help me, he begged. Peter grabbed him by the shoulders and tried to hold him down. Then he climbed partly onto him, reaching for the line again, sawing at it with the knife. It still would not break. The hook sliced upward through Caleb's throat. His voice became wet and torn. The point pushed higher until it caught near the base of his neck. It hurts, Caleb cried. Please, help. I don't know what to do, Peter said, shaking. I don't know what to do. Then Peter slipped and fell. He landed badly, and a sharp pain exploded in his right ankle. He looked down and saw it twisted at a wrong angle, already swelling. Caleb. Pete. Caleb screamed from above. Pete, help me. The line pulled Caleb up through the fog. His legs kicked wildly until the mist swallowed him. Peter sat in the mud, holding his ankle, sobbing from pain and fear. Above him, Caleb's cries continued for a few seconds. Then they stopped. A loud bang echoed through the woods. After that came a grinding sound. Caleb? Peter whispered. He looked up into the fog. Nothing. Only silence. Then, blood and torn pieces of flesh began to rain down. Chunks hit the ground around him. Bits of bone, meat, and wet pieces of something soft struck his face and shoulders. Some got into his mouth. Peter gagged and spat, shaking so hard he could barely breathe. A tooth landed on his tongue, and he spit it into the mud. What the hell? He screamed. A sound rose around him. At first, it was low, almost like wind. Then it became voices. A chorus of soft singing drifted through the fog. Peter looked around. Shapes began forming between the trees. Hundreds of human silhouettes stood in the mist. They were pale and blurred, like people made from fog. Each one had bright blue eyes that stared at him without blinking. Above him, another shape slowly lowered from the fog. It had the same glowing eyes. Its mouth hung open, and a hook was buried in its throat. Peter dragged himself backward, crying out. The figure touched the ground. Then it reached into its own mouth and pulled the hook out as if it felt no pain at all. Then it disappeared. The singing stopped. The woods became silent again. Peter turned to his right. The gray fisherman stood there, watching him. The figure reached behind its back and pulled out a fishing rod. No, Peter whispered. No, no, no. He forced himself onto his feet. His broken ankle screamed with pain, but he limped away as fast as he could. Hooks began falling all around him again. They swung through the fog, cutting the air. One struck his arm and tore away a strip of skin. Another grazed the side of his neck. A third swung low and caught his broken ankle, ripping into it and sending blood down into his shoe. Peter ducked his head and raised his arms to protect his face. "Pete, wait up." The voice sounded like Caleb. Peter looked back. A hook swung out of the fog and caught his eye. He screamed as it pulled upward. The hook scraped inside his eye socket, ripping through soft flesh. It tore into his eyelid and yanked free, taking part of the lid and the lens of his eye with it. Pain burst through his skull so hard that the world turned white. He staggered forward, blind on one side, choking on his own screams. His broken ankle caught on a tree root, and he fell hard. The ground vanished beneath him. He tumbled down a muddy hill, hitting rocks, roots, and branches until he landed at the bottom. For a while, he just lay there, crying. Then he opened his good eye. The fog was thinner here. Through the pain and tears, he saw something ahead of him. The front of his truck. Peter did not know how he had reached it. He did not care. With the last strength he had, he crawled, then limped, then dragged himself to the driver's side door. His hands were slippery with blood, but he managed to pull it open. He fell into the seat, shoved the key into the ignition, and turned it. The engine started. Before he drove away, he looked back at the woods. The fog was almost gone. Only two figures remained at the tree line, staring at him. One was tall and gray. The other was Caleb. Then Peter pressed the gas, and as the truck lurched forward, both figures faded into nothing. Story 2. My grandpa only told this story when there was a storm outside. Not a soft rain or a little wind, but a real storm. The kind where thunder shook the whole house and made the windows tremble in their frames. The kind where lightning flashed so bright that the living room turned white for half a second, and every shadow jumped like it was alive. On those nights, the wind would push against the walls and howl down the chimney, and the lights would flicker as if they were not sure whether they wanted to stay on. That was when my grandpa would sit in his old chair by the fire, holding a cup of tea between both hands. He would stare into the flames for a long time before saying, "Put another log on the fire. Moya Lyubov, I have a story for you." He always began it the same way. "My mother told me this," he would say. "Your great-grandmother heard it from her father, and he swore it really happened when he was just a boy. It happened right here in New England, long before you were born, long before I was born, and long before people stopped believing there were things in the dark that should be feared." Then he would take a slow sip of tea, keeping his eyes on the fire. "They had a cat," he would say, "a beautiful old cat named Mirka. One spring, Mirka had kittens, 5 of them. 4 were soft little things, striped and pale, like their mother. But one of them was black, not gray, not brown, not the kind of black that turned silver in the sun. It was black like spilled ink, black like a shadow hiding under a bed. And my grandmother, your great-great-grandmother, said that Kitten was evil. He would always pause there and look at me, just to see if I was still listening. She was not wrong, he would say. Then he would lean back in his chair, and the story would begin. The family lived in a blue house near the woods, in a quiet little town in New England. The town was small enough that everyone knew each other, or at least thought they did. Most people there could not pronounce their last name, Petrovsky, so they simply called them the Russians. It was not said with hate most of the time, just with that lazy way small towns have of naming people by the thing that makes them different. The house was old, but warm. In the winters, smoke curled from the chimney almost every evening. In the summer, the windows stayed open, and the smell of fresh bread drifted out into the yard. Misha, the father, taught math at a community college not far from town. He was a calm man who wore glasses and always had chalk dust on his sleeves. His wife, Galina, baked bread so good that neighbors found reasons to slow down when they passed the house. Sometimes they would stand near the mailbox longer than they needed to, hoping she might come out and offer them a loaf. Their son, Alexei, was 10 years old. He had dark, messy hair that stuck up no matter how much his mother tried to smooth it down, and there was a little gap between his front teeth. He was a gentle boy, the kind who watched ants carry crumbs instead of stepping on them. He talked to bugs, frogs, birds, and anything else small enough to make most children curious. He had a soft heart, and because of that, everyone in the house worried about him in their own way. Then there was Babushka, Misha's mother. She was small, strong, and old in a way that made people lower their voices around her. She wore thick sweaters even in warm weather and kept dried herbs tied in little cloth bags in her pockets. She had come with them from Russia, carrying more memories than luggage, and she believed in things the rest of the family tried to laugh away. She believed in signs. She believed in dreams. She believed that some animals were only animals, and some were doors. And of course, there was Mirka. Mirka was a fat, long-haired tabby with yellow eyes and a tail that moved like it had a mind of its own. She ruled the house without ever needing to raise a paw. She had been with the family since Moscow. Galina had hidden her inside her coat when they left, refusing to abandon her. Mirka had survived 2 small apartments, a long move across the ocean, a winter storm that knocked the power out for 8 days, and even the birth of Alexei, who had once pulled her tail when he was a baby and learned very quickly never to do it again. So when Mirka became heavy with kittens, the whole house treated it like a blessing. The kittens were born on a quiet Tuesday in April, beneath the radiator near the piano. Rain tapped softly against the windows that morning, and the house smelled of bread, tea, and warm dust. Mirka gave birth to 5 kittens. 4 of them looked like her in some way, striped or cream-colored, soft and blind and helpless. The last one was different. It came out smaller than the others, silent at first, with fur so black it seemed to swallow the light around it. Galina thought it was beautiful. Misha said it looked like a little drop of night. Alexei fell in love with it at once, but Babushka stood in the doorway, looked at the black kitten, and crossed herself. "Chortov Kochinok," she whispered. "Devil kitten." Galina laughed softly, thinking the old woman was only being dramatic. "Baba, please, it is just a baby." Babushka did not laugh. Her mouth became a thin line. "You keep that one, and bad things will come. It happened before, with your uncle, with others before him. You do not keep such a thing in the house." Misha sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose beneath his glasses. "Mama, not this again." But Babushka did not argue. She only turned away, muttering prayers under her breath. For the first few days, nothing happened. The kittens slept in a pile of warmth under the radiator. Mirka cleaned them and watched everyone with sharp eyes, ready to scratch any hand that moved too quickly. Galina brought saucers of milk and little bits of food for Mirka. Misha made a small box fort out of cardboard and old towels. Alexei sat beside the kittens for hours, reading to them from his school books, even though they could not understand a word. The black kitten opened its eyes before the others. That was the first thing Babushka noticed. One morning, Alexei leaned close to the box and gasped. "Mama, look! The black one can see!" Galina came over, smiling. But the smile faded a little when she saw the kitten staring back. Its eyes were not fully blue like most newborn kittens. They looked too dark, too steady. For one strange second, Galina felt as if a very old person was looking out through that tiny face. Then the kitten sneezed, wobbled, and fell against one of its brothers, and Galina laughed at herself for being silly. Alexei chose the black kitten as his own. Of course he did. He named her Nyx, after a goddess of night he had read about in a book from the library. Because she is brave, he said. She is not scared of anything. Babushka heard the name and made the sign of the cross again. After that, she stopped sitting in the living room when the kittens were out. She kept more herbs in her pockets. She placed little bundles of dried plants above doorways. When Galina asked what she was doing, Babushka said protection. Galina told Misha his mother was going to frighten the child. Misha said she had always been like this. At first, the strange things were small enough to explain away. Alexei had a hamster named Button. It lived in a wire cage on the dresser in his room. One morning, the cage door was wide open. Button was gone. They searched the whole room, then the hall, then under every piece of furniture in the house. They found nothing. No fur, no blood, no tiny body, just the empty cage, swinging open. Alexei cried for 2 days. Galina told him hamsters were clever, and Button had probably found a hole somewhere. But Babushka looked toward the corner, where Nyx slept curled in a black circle, and said nothing. A few days later, the neighbor's little Pomeranian was found dead in the Petrovsky driveway. It had been a noisy dog, always barking at leaves, cars, birds, and sometimes nothing at all. Its owner said the dog had been locked inside the house all night. No one knew how it had gotten out. No one knew how it had ended up in the driveway. Its neck was broken, but there were no bite marks, no blood, and no sign that a larger animal had attacked it. Nyx was still tiny then, hardly big enough to climb onto the sofa by herself. When people looked at her, she would blink slowly and stretch one little paw. She is just a kitten, Galina said. She could not hurt anything. And maybe that was true. Maybe it was only bad luck. Maybe the hamster escaped. And maybe the dog somehow slipped out and got hurt. The world is full of odd things, and not all of them mean something. But then the lights started acting strangely. The hallway light flickered whenever Nyx passed under it. Not every time, but often enough for Alexei to notice. The lamp near Misha's desk would buzz when the kitten jumped onto the chair beside it. The kitchen bulb burned out 3 times in 1 week. Galina blamed old wiring. Misha said he would call someone to check it. But Babushka stood in the kitchen with her arms crossed and said, "Wires do not fear cats." Alexei's nightmares came back next. He had suffered from bad dreams when he was younger, but they had gone away. Now they returned worse than before. He dreamed of something sitting at the foot of his bed. It was tall, even while seated, with thin arms and fingers that were far too long. Its face was hidden in shadow, but he knew it was looking at him. It whispered in a voice like wet leaves sliding over stone. At first, he could not remember the words. Then, one morning, he woke up pale and shaking and told his mother, "It said I opened the door." Galina held him and told him dreams could not hurt him. But that evening, Babushka painted old symbols on the bedroom doorframe using water mixed with ash. Misha was angry when he saw it. "Mama, enough," he said. "You are making this worse." Babushka looked at him with tired eyes. "No," I am late. That is worse. Misha began losing things around the same time. First, his glasses vanished from the kitchen table and appeared later inside the freezer. Then his keys went missing and were found under Alexei's pillow. Papers from his college office showed up folded inside the bread box. At first he laughed, thinking Alexei was playing tricks, but Alexei swore he was not, and Galina believed him. Misha stopped laughing after he lost his wedding ring. He had taken it off before fixing the sink and set it on the windowsill. 10 minutes later, it was gone. They searched for hours. Galina moved every dish, every towel, every jar. Misha checked the drain 3 times. Babushka stood near the living room doorway, watching Nick sit on the piano bench with her tail curled around her paws. That night, Misha shouted at Galina for the first time in years. It was not even about the ring by then. It was about the house, the money, his mother, the strange feeling of being watched. His voice grew louder and harsher until Alexei began to cry upstairs. The moment Alexei cried, every light in the house went out. For 10 seconds, the house was completely dark. Then the lights came back on. Nix was sitting in the middle of the hallway, staring at Misha. After that, even Galina stopped defending the kitten so quickly. Still, Nix was sweet when she wanted to be. She climbed into Galina's lap and purred. She slept beside Alexei while he read. She played with string and chased dust in sunbeams like any normal kitten. Sometimes Galina would look at her and feel foolish for being afraid. Then came the night Alexei woke up screaming. It was late, close to midnight. Rain was hitting the windows, and the wind pushed against the blue house from the direction of the woods. Galina and Misha ran into Alexei's room so fast that Misha struck his shoulder on the doorframe. Babushka came behind them with a candle in one hand and a small cloth bag of herbs in the other. Alexei was not in bed. He was curled in the corner of the room, shaking so hard his teeth clicked together. His pajama shirt was torn open, and there were long scratches across his chest. Thin lines of blood ran down his skin. Galina dropped to her knees. "My baby, what happened?" Alexei pointed toward the bed. His hand trembled. "She was on me," he cried. Nix was on me. Her mouth opened too wide. It was not her mouth anymore. They all turned, expecting to see the kitten on the bed. Nix was not there. Then Misha saw her on the windowsill. She sat perfectly still, her black body outlined against the glass. Rain ran down the window behind her. Her tail moved slowly from side to side. Her eyes were wide, empty, and fixed on Alexei. For once, Misha did not argue with his mother. He said, "It is time." Galina began to cry, because even then, part of her loved the kitten. Alexei would not look at Nix. Misha wrapped the kitten in a towel, careful to keep his hands away from her mouth, though she did not fight him. She only stared. They told themselves they would take her to a farm or a shelter, somewhere far away, somewhere kind. But Babushka stood in front of the door and shook her head. "No," she said. "There is only one way." Misha looked at her for a long moment. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to be a modern man, an educated man, the kind of man who did not walk into the woods at midnight because his old mother feared a kitten. But his son was bleeding upstairs. The house smelled of rain and smoke and something sour beneath it. The lights were flickering again. So they followed Babushka. They went into the woods behind the house. Misha carried Nix wrapped in the towel. Galina carried Alexei, though he was almost too big for it. and he clung to her neck like a much younger child. Babushka walked ahead of them with the candle, though the wind should have blown it out. Somehow the flame kept burning. The woods were thick and old. The trees grew close together, their branches twisting above like black fingers. The rain had slowed to a mist, but water still dripped from the leaves. Every step sank into wet earth. No one spoke for a long time. At last, they reached a clearing. In the center of it was a ring of stones. The stones were low and dark, half sunk into the ground. Moss covered them, and weeds grew between them. They looked older than the town, older than the roads, older than the names people had given the land. Alexei had played near those woods many times, but he had never seen the stone ring before. Later, he would wonder how that was possible. Babushka stopped at the edge of the circle. I knew when I saw her, she said quietly, "She is not only a cat. She is a vessel. She wears the face of a cat, but something else is inside. Something old, something hungry. It finds small things because people protect small things. They invite them in. They feed them. They let them sleep beside their children." Galina sobbed. "Please, Baba." Babushka's face softened for only a second. "The cat may still be in there. We will try to save her. But the thing inside must leave." Misha placed the towel in the center of the stones and opened it. Nick stepped out. For a moment, she looked like nothing more than a tiny black kitten standing in wet grass. Her fur was damp. Her ears were flat. She seemed frightened, and Galina covered her mouth to stop herself from picking her up. Then Nix turned her head toward Babushka. Her eyes changed. They became deep and dark, too large for her little face. The trees around the clearing seemed to lean closer. The air grew colder. Alexei pressed his face into his mother's shoulder. Babushka knelt at the edge of the stones and began to whisper words no one else understood. They were not Russian, or at least not any Russian Misha knew. They sounded older, rougher, like stones being rubbed together. She took dried herbs from her pocket and crushed them in her hands, letting the pieces fall onto the wet ground. The wind rose. Nick stood in the middle of the ring without moving. Then the kitten opened her mouth. The sound that came out was not a meow. It was not a hiss. It was a long, thin cry that seemed far too big for her body. It rose into the trees and came back from every direction. Galina fell to her knees. Misha covered his ears. Alexei began to scream, but his voice was lost under the sound. The shadows beneath the trees moved. They pulled toward the kitten all at once, sliding across the ground like black water. Darkness gathered around Nix's small body, twisting and turning like smoke in a storm. Inside that darkness, Alexei thought he saw shapes. Long fingers, hollow eyes, open mouths, faces that were almost human, but not enough. Babushka kept whispering. The air became so cold that Misha could see his breath. Frost formed on the wet stones. Galina held Alexei tighter and prayed in broken words. The darkness wrapped itself around Nix. For one terrible second, the kitten's body stretched in a way no living thing should stretch. Her shadow grew tall behind her, taller than any person, with arms that reached toward the trees. Then Babushka shouted one final word. The candle went out. The wind stopped. The darkness tore away from the kitten and rushed into the woods. It moved fast, faster than any animal, slipping between the trees and vanishing into the storm. The whole clearing became still. Nix collapsed onto her side. Nobody moved. Galina was crying silently. Misha stared at the kitten, his face pale. Babushka remained on her knees, breathing hard, one hand pressed to her chest. Then Nick sneezed. It was tiny, ordinary, a soft little kitten sneeze. The sound broke whatever fear had frozen them in place. Nix lifted her head and blinked. Her eyes were normal now. Not empty, not old, just frightened and confused. She gave a small, weak meow. Galina ran into the ring and scooped her up before anyone could stop her. Nix curled into her hands and began to purr. The purr was so strong that her whole tiny body shook with it. Babushka stared at the kitten for a long time. Then she crossed herself 3 times. "It is gone," she whispered. They brought Nix home. After that night, the house changed. The hallway lights stopped flickering. Misha's missing ring was found the next morning on the kitchen windowsill, exactly where he had left it. Alexei's nightmares ended. Nothing else disappeared. No dead animals were found in the driveway. The house felt warm again. Nix grew like any normal cat. In fact, she became one of the laziest cats anyone in town had ever seen. She spent her days sleeping in sunbeams, rolling onto her back, and stealing bits of chicken from plates when no one was watching. She became spoiled, fat, and deeply pleased with herself. Alexei loved her more than ever. She sat beside him while he did homework. She slept on his bed almost every night. When he was sick, she stayed near him until he got better. When he grew older and left for college, Nix waited by the front door whenever he came home, as if she had been counting the days. Years passed. Alexei became a man. He married and had children of his own. Nix was still there, older now, gray around the mouth and slower on the stairs, but still purring, still stealing food, still acting as if every chair in the house belonged to her. Everyone accepted her. Everyone except Babushka. Even after 15 years, Babushka never fully trusted that cat. She fed her, yes. She sometimes scratched her behind the ears when she thought no one was looking. But she never looked too long into Nix's eyes. She never let the cat sleep in her room. And whenever thunder rolled across New England and the wind rattled the windows, Babushka would glance toward the dark woods behind the house. Then she would quietly lock the door. Because whatever had been hiding inside that kitten had left. But no one ever found out where it went. And sometimes, on stormy nights, when the thunder shook the house and lightning turned the trees white for a heartbeat, the family thought they heard something moving in the woods. Something slow. Something patient. Something still looking for another way in. Story 3. She was sitting at a bar in downtown Rochester, a town that looked almost too perfect to be real. The streets were lined with old brick buildings, each one a little worn by time, but still pretty in a careful way. Bright awnings hung over the shop windows, and baskets of flowers swung gently from hooks. Small strings of warm lights glowed above the sidewalks as evening settled in. Most of the stores were family businesses that had been there for years, passed from one generation to the next. Young couples walked hand in hand under the soft June sky. Children laughed as they chased each other near the road, while their parents sat outside a restaurant and talked over dinner. An old woman sat on a porch nearby, rocking slowly in her chair while she knitted. Everything about the town seemed calm, safe, as if the outside world had no power there, as if nothing bad could ever happen in Rochester Hills. Jennifer had moved there from Detroit after finishing college. She wanted a change. She wanted quiet streets, friendly faces, and a place where life felt slower and more real. At first, she truly believed she had found exactly that. She also hoped, though she did not say it out loud, that maybe she might find love there too. And not long after moving in, she did. She was watching the town enjoy the warm evening when a man sat down beside her at the bar. He looked like he was in his late 30s. He was handsome in a clean, quiet way, dressed nicely without looking like he had tried too hard. He carried himself with confidence, but there was something sad in his smile. The moment he arrived, the feeling in the bar changed. Mothers called their children back from the street. People at nearby tables lowered their voices. A few people walking past the windows moved faster, whispering to each other as they went. The old woman on the porch stopped rocking and stared toward the man. Even the birds seemed quieter. Jennifer noticed it all, but she did not understand it. To her, he just looked like a successful man having a drink after work. Maybe the town had its own strange habits. Maybe it was just a coincidence. So she smiled at him. The man did not seem to care about the way everyone reacted. He looked straight into Jennifer's eyes, studying her face for just a little too long. "You're new here," he said. Jennifer smiled. "Yeah, I just moved here. It's beautiful. Did you grow up here?" The man gave a soft sigh. "Don't worry about them." "Worry about who?" He took a sip of his drink, as if that part of the conversation was already over. Then he looked at her again. "What's your name?" "Jennifer," she said, still smiling, though a small, uneasy feeling had begun to rise inside her. "That's a beautiful name." He kept watching her. "I was going to say something smooth, but I think I would fail badly." Jennifer laughed a little. "I'm sure it wouldn't be that bad. Worse than you think," he said. "I tend to overthink things. Most people do. Not like I do." He said it calmly, with the same faint smile. Jennifer looked at him with more interest now. "So what's your name?" There was a pause before he answered. "Adam," Jennifer nodded slowly. "I think I've heard that name before." His expression changed, just for a second. "Have you?" She hesitated. "I heard some people talking about you. They called you Adam the Widower." Adam was silent for a moment. "People talk about a lot of things," he said at last. "That's not really an answer." "No," he said. "I guess it isn't." Jennifer looked at him more seriously. "Is it true?" His eyes moved past her, toward the street outside, where people were still avoiding his direction. "My first wife died in a car accident," he said quietly. "My second wife, people say she disappeared. The third one," he stopped himself and looked down at his drink. "Stories get messy after a while. People like to add things." Jennifer's smile faded. "Oh, I'm sorry." She watched him for a moment, holding his gaze longer than she meant to. "I won't pry," she said. After that night, Jennifer kept seeing him. Not every day, but often enough that it stopped feeling random. Sometimes he was at the same bar. Sometimes she saw him at the bus stop in the morning. Other times he was standing near the edge of a crowd at a baseball game, calm and quiet, like he had always known she would be there. Their talks grew longer each time. At first, they were easy conversations. Small, simple, easy to end. But then they started becoming harder to leave. One night, Jennifer stayed at the bar far longer than she had planned. Another time, she caught herself finishing one of his sentences without thinking. Soon, the silence between them did not feel awkward anymore. It felt familiar, comfortable. Adam never seemed surprised when he saw her. It was almost as if he expected her. After a while, Jennifer began expecting him too. Then she realized she had started planning her days around the chance of seeing him. They walked together after work. They sat together longer than they meant to. They shared small details about their lives, and those small details began to feel important. Eventually, she started visiting his house after work. One evening, Adam told her to come over at 7. It was 6:58 when Jennifer parked in his driveway. His house stood on Waycroft Court, a quiet cul-de-sac that curved away from the rest of the neighborhood, almost as if it did not fully belong to it. The houses there were older than the others in town, though still well kept. Tall trees leaned over the road, their branches forming a dark green roof above. Adam's house was the last one. It sat slightly farther back than the rest, separated by a wide yard and long shadows. It was a one-story craftsman house with faded green siding, a gray shingled roof, and a wide cement porch. Warm light glowed from the windows. Jennifer walked up the steps. She had been nervous all day because she was staying the night with him for the first time. She had practiced what she would say when he opened the door. But before she could knock, the door opened. "You found it," Adam said. "You gave good directions." He stepped back and let her inside. The house smelled like smoke, old wood and something cooking. Garlic, maybe, with red wine. Under that was another smell, something older and sweeter. It was faint, but she noticed it. The smell of the house itself, she guessed. Worn wood. Dust, time, the warmth inside replaced the cool autumn air around her. The entryway opened into a living room lit by soft lamps. The couch looked like it had been used for years. A book lay open on the handmade coffee table. A wool blanket was folded over the arm of the chair near the window. Everything looked lived in, but carefully arranged. It reminded her of Adam. He went back into the kitchen, where something simmered on the stove. "Feel free to look around or sit down," he said. Jennifer moved slowly through the living room, trying to look without seeming too curious. The kitchen was at the back of the house, almost part of the living room. The only thing separating the spaces was a round wooden dining table. Steel pots hung above the stove. Knives were arranged on the wall from smallest to largest. Adam stood at the burner, stirring a pan. Jennifer turned her attention to the bookshelves. There was no TV, which was not exactly strange, but it seemed unusual for a man who seemed to have money. One shelf held small wooden objects that looked handmade. There was a rough bowl, a box with a fitted lid, a shape that looked like a woman, and another figure she could not understand. It looked somewhere between a person and an animal, or maybe neither. "Adam, did you make these?" she asked. He took a moment before answering. Yes, he stood still for a second, then poured wine into 2 glasses and came over. He handed one to Jennifer and stared at the shelf. "The bowl was my first serious attempt," he said. He picked it up and turned it over in his hands, touching the uneven surface with care. "You can see where I was still fighting the wood. The grain does what it wants. You either learn to follow it, or you ruin the whole thing. The hardest part is making the material obey." He set the bowl back in the exact place it had been, careful not to disturb the dust around it. Jennifer picked up the figure shaped like a woman. Its face looked strange, caught somewhere between pleasure and fear. One arm was shaped clearly, while the other seemed unfinished, as if the person making it had grown angry or impatient. Jennifer put it back and picked up the next figure. This one made her uneasy right away. It was twisted into a position that did not look possible. It had 2 faces, both rough and distorted, as if they were in pain. It had too many arms. Its body was strange, with some parts shaped more carefully than others. As Jennifer looked at it, a heavy feeling settled in her stomach. "What is this?" she asked, holding it carefully by the base. "Whatever I needed it to be," Adam said. Then he walked back toward the kitchen. Jennifer set the figure down. "What does that mean?" Adam sighed, as if the question annoyed him a little. There is a difference between a person who works with wood and a person who understands it, he said. Most people treat it like a material, something to cut into shape and finish. He said the word finish with quiet disgust. "I'm not interested in that." "Then what are you interested in?" He considered the question very seriously. "Transformation," he said at last. "What something can become when you know what you're doing with it." He took the figure and placed it back on the shelf. Then he adjusted the wooden woman beside it before returning to the kitchen. Jennifer stared at the shelf a moment longer, then followed him. "Please sit," Adam said. The dining table had already been set. One place for her, one place for him. Jennifer smiled, set down her wine, and sat. She watched him cook. He moved through the kitchen with calm, familiar ease, reaching for spices without looking, opening drawers before he even needed them. He knew that room the way a person knows their own body. Jennifer could tell he had lived there for a long time. His movements had the rhythm of routine. Her eyes moved around the kitchen, past the window above the sink, past the back door, then to a narrow door at the far end of the kitchen. It was plain wood with a simple latch. It sat almost flat against the wall, half hidden by shadows. It could have been a closet, or a basement door, or storage. Jennifer looked back at Adam. "Wow, that smells good." "Old recipe," he said. "I've made it so many times it's easier than breathing." Jennifer laughed and took a sip of wine. That's exactly what people say when they've perfected something. Adam smiled. Then Jennifer nodded toward the narrow door. "Where does that go?" "Storage room," he said. "I'd prefer you not go down there." "Oh," she said. Okay, she settled back into her seat. They ate quietly while the last of the sunlight faded outside. Adam switched on the ceiling lights, and the room filled with warm yellow light. The neighborhood outside was silent. As Jennifer wrapped her hand around her wine glass, she felt oddly safe, almost at home. For a while, the only sounds were the wind in the trees and silverware touching their plates. Adam finally spoke. "How are you liking Rochester Hills?" Jennifer brightened. "I love it. It's everything I wanted when I left Detroit." "And what did you want?" She thought about it. Something quieter. Something that felt real. "I was tired of the city. Tired of all the noise. Does this feel real?" Jennifer smiled. "Yes, it does." Adam watched her face. The way he studied her made her feel a little exposed, like he was reading every small change in her expression. "You eat alone most nights," he said. Jennifer blinked. "Well, I'm still getting to know people." "That's not what I asked." She set her fork down. "I guess I do." "Yes," he nodded slowly, as if she had confirmed something he already knew. "You seem like someone who should settle into a place quickly. Someone who should be good at meeting people." Jennifer stayed quiet. "You watch people," he continued. "At the bar, at the game, you stand slightly outside the group and observe. You're interested, but you're not really inside it." He took a sip of wine. "I'm not judging you. I just notice small things." The table was silent for a long moment. Jennifer was the first to speak. Does it bother you, being alone? Adam thought about the answer for a long time. No, he said. I have my work. I'm not alone. Jennifer nodded. Something about that answer stayed with her, though she did not know why. After that night, she kept going back to his house. At first, she visited a few times a week. Then, she spent more time there than she did at her own place. Eventually, she did not need an invitation anymore. His door was always unlocked, and he always seemed pleased when she came in. She learned which burner on the stove did not work right. She had her side of the bed. She kept clothes in one of his drawers. She knew where the towels were and how Adam liked his coffee. She learned that he was happiest after his morning coffee, and again after dinner when the dishes were clean and the wine was gone. The strange little things in the house stopped bothering her. She stopped noticing the wooden figures. She stopped noticing how everything had to be placed just right. She stopped noticing the door. The house had a way of pulling her in slowly. It absorbed her, the way thick walls absorb sound, the way another person's smell begins to cling to your clothes after you spend enough nights beside them. Jennifer found herself straightening things that were already straight. She left her book on the coffee table lined up beside his. Each morning, she folded the blanket and placed it over the chair exactly where it belonged. She did these things without thinking. She felt more at home in Adam's house than she had anywhere else. Eventually, she stopped going home. She never thought much about the storage room. It was just a door at the end of the kitchen. Houses had doors. That was all. Then one night, something changed. Jennifer woke around 2 a.m. Adam was asleep beside her. The house was still, but not completely. There was a low sound coming from somewhere below them, or maybe inside the walls. It had a slow rhythm to it. She sat up and listened. Then she smelled it. That same sweet, sick smell from the first night she had entered the house. It was stronger now, drifting up through the dark. After a few minutes, the sound faded. The smell faded, too. Jennifer told herself it was probably the pipes, or an animal outside, or wind moving through the old siding. She lay back down and closed her eyes. By morning, she had almost forgotten about it. Almost, on a Monday night in early November, Adam told Jennifer he had to leave the next morning for a work conference in Chicago. He would be gone for 3 days and would come home Friday evening. They went to bed as usual. Around 6 a.m, Adam got up and dressed quietly, trying not to wake her. But Jennifer woke anyway and hurried downstairs to say goodbye. "You didn't have to get up," he said. "I know." He kissed her forehead like he did every morning. His bag was already in the car. He put on his gloves and walked to the door. "There's food in the refrigerator." "I know." "I'll be fine. I know you will." He left. Jennifer stood on the porch and watched him drive away. He looked back once before pulling out of the driveway. When his car disappeared, she went inside and made coffee. She sat on the couch with her book. She did not have to work again until the next Monday because after moving in with Adam, she had changed to part-time hours. The first day was normal. It almost felt like Adam had not left. The house still held him, his smell, his silence, his careful order. Jennifer spent the day reading, doing laundry, speaking to friends on the phone, and sitting in the backyard, watching small snails move through the grass before the cold winter came. The day passed faster than she expected. That night, she made the same pasta Adam always made for her, ate alone, cleaned everything, and went to bed. The next morning, she woke around 5 and could not fall back asleep. She went downstairs and made coffee. Then, she sat on the porch with her book. The neighborhood was quiet. It was always quiet. But this felt different. It was the silence of a house that knew it had been left alone. She went back inside. Jennifer sat on the couch and tried to read. The book was about insects. Adam had bookmarked a page about caterpillars and the way they changed into butterflies. Metamorphosis. She frowned a little. Adam had many books about insects, now that she thought about it, even though he had never once shown interest in them. She put the book down. The clock on the shelf ticked too loudly. She tried to ignore it, but the sound grew sharper with every second. Finally, she got up and took the batteries out. She sat back down. Now the hum of the refrigerator seemed too loud. It filled the kitchen and crawled into her head. Annoyed, she got up and kicked the side of it. The sound changed a little, but did not stop. She looked down and saw that she had dented the metal. Only a few hours had passed. She made pasta again, the way Adam did. She ate it, cleaned the kitchen, and made sure everything was exactly where he had left it. Then she checked again. The pan, the spoon, the plates, the book, the blanket. Everything had to be correct. She cleaned the bedroom. She dusted, mopped, swept, and folded. When she sat on the bed, it was only 5 in the evening. She had cleaned almost the entire house over the past 2 days. Except the drawers. She decided she could pass the time by organizing Adam's clothes. When she opened the top drawer of his dresser, all his clothes were already folded neatly. Still, she took them out to fold them again. Just as she lifted the first stack of shirts, she heard a creak from downstairs. Adam? She called. She ran down to the living room. But it was only an open window moving slightly in the wind. She slammed it shut and went back upstairs. When she lifted the shirts again, she saw something underneath them. A rusty metal key. Jennifer picked it up. Suddenly, she remembered the storage room. She put the key on the nightstand and lay down on the bed. Maybe she was just tired. Maybe she would feel better in the morning. She turned off the lamp and lay in the darkness. But sleep would not come. All she could think about was the door at the end of the kitchen. What was behind it? Why had Adam told her not to go down there? Why would the key be hidden under his clothes? She tossed and turned for hours, trying to think about anything else. But the door stayed in her mind. Around 2 in the morning, she could not stand it anymore. Jennifer got out of bed, picked up the key, and walked slowly downstairs. The kitchen was dark, except for the small light above the stove, the one she always left on at night. The tile felt cold under her feet. She crossed the room and stopped in front of the narrow door. She lifted the padlock and slid the key inside. It fit perfectly. Jennifer took a deep breath and turned it. The lock clicked open. She removed it from the latch and pushed the door. It opened with a long, awful creak. Stale, damp air rushed out from below. She could see the faint outline of stairs leading down into darkness. Carefully, she stepped onto the first stair. The steps were stone, cold and wet under her bare feet. The farther she went down, the stronger the sweet, sick smell became. Every part of her wanted to turn back, but she kept moving. At the bottom, the floor was rough concrete. It felt almost sticky beneath her feet. She ran one hand along the wall and felt unfinished brick, damp cement, and patches of mold. Then the smell hit her fully. That sweet, rotten smell. The same smell she had noticed when she first entered the house. The same smell from the night she had heard the sound below. Something brushed her forehead. She flinched, then realized it was the chain for a ceiling light. She reached up and pulled it. A bare bulb flickered on. Jennifer would have screamed if she could. Instead, the sound left her body like air leaking from something punctured. Then there was only silence, a silence so loud she could hear her own heartbeat. Across the basement, against the wall, stood a wooden frame that reached from floor to ceiling. Adam had built it himself. She knew it from the way the wood had been cut and joined, with the same careful precision he used for everything else. They were mounted on it, 7 bodies. The first was the oldest. Jennifer could tell by the decay, by the way time had damaged what chemicals and care could not save. The body had been arranged with attention, but not much skill. The stitching was rough and uneven, pulled too tight in some places so the skin had puckered and torn. The face was missing, not from decay, but because it had been removed, cut away. The yellowed skull showed through rotting muscle. A wedding ring still sat on one finger. The second body was missing an arm at the shoulder. The wound had been stitched closed. The stitches were still ugly, but better than the first, more controlled. The remaining arm had been bent upward and sewn against the chest, the hand open like a prayer. She wore a wedding ring, too. The third had no head. The neck was closed with neat stitching, much cleaner than before. Adam had been learning. The body was arranged more carefully, the hands folded across the chest and fixed in place. Another ring shone on the finger. Jennifer stared at the fourth body for a long time before she understood what she was seeing. The chest had been opened, and parts had been removed. The cuts were clean, almost surgical. The stitching was fine and careful. This body had been preserved better than the first 3. It did not look fresh, but it looked far too well kept. The hands were tied above the head. The feet were tied together. There were rings on the fingers and tattoos on the skin, though many of the tattoos had been cut into, as if they had bothered him. The fifth body was missing a leg from the hip. The closure was perfect, a clean line following the joint. The thread was so fine, it was almost invisible. The remaining foot was pointed like a dancer's. This one had not been sewn into position. It looked like Adam had posed her before death fully stiffened her body. She had an engagement ring on her finger. Her face was beautiful, her eyes closed as if she were sleeping. Jennifer's stomach twisted, not only because of what she was seeing, but because of the patience it must have taken, the care, the time. She remembered what Adam had once said at the table. I have my work. I'm not alone. The sixth was the worst. It barely looked human anymore. Everything from the neck down was gone except parts that should not have been able to remain together. The torso and arms were missing. What remained was a head, legs, and a spine. He had not tried to make this one beautiful. He had not cleaned it with the same care. It looked like it had only been used for parts. The face was twisted in pain. And then there was the seventh. Jennifer's eyes stopped on the last figure. It was made from all of them. The face from the first had been attached to the head of the third with stitches so fine they were almost invisible. The arm from the second was joined beneath the shoulder of another body. Parts from the fourth and fifth had been added. Different skin tones met and blended along careful lines. It almost looked alive. The hair was brushed, the nails were trimmed, the eyes were closed peacefully. Unlike the others, This one stood on the floor instead of hanging from the frame. In dimmer light, Jennifer might have thought it was a sleeping woman standing there. It had been given more care than all the rest. That was when Jennifer understood. The others had been practice. Each woman had given something to this final thing. A face, a limb, a shape, a piece. The only signs of what it really was were the seams. Fine lines across the face, down the neck, over the shoulder, across the chest, along the hip. Pieces taken away and put back together. Changed, improved, made closer to whatever Adam wanted. Still missing a few parts. Jennifer's hand closed tightly around the padlock. She remembered the wooden figure on the shelf, the twisted creature with too many arms and faces that looked like they were suffering. She remembered asking him what it was, whatever I needed it to be. Then she heard footsteps on the stairs. A cold hand closed around her shoulder. "Sweetheart," Adam said behind her, "I told you not to go down there." Jennifer did not move. His hand felt like ice. Calm, cruel, certain. It felt as if he had expected this. Maybe he had come home early on purpose. Maybe he had always known he would catch her off guard. His grip tightened as she stared at the seventh woman. Then, Jennifer drove her elbow into his ribs as hard as she could. Adam stumbled back with a short, surprised sound. His grip loosened, not from pain, but from shock. For once, he had not predicted her. Jennifer swung again, slamming the heavy padlock into the side of his head. Adam crashed sideways into his creations. The wooden frame shook. Something shifted in the dark. Jennifer did not look back. She ran for the stairs. She was halfway up when his hand grabbed her ankle. She fell hard, her chin striking the edge of a stone step. Blood filled her mouth with a sharp metal taste. She kicked backward with all her strength and felt her heel hit something soft. Adam's grip loosened. She scrambled up the rest of the stairs on her hands and knees and burst into the kitchen. The room looked exactly as it always did. The small stove light was on. The knives were lined on the wall by size. The pan was still on the burner. The table stood in the center of the room. Everything was in its place. Jennifer had learned that kitchen without meaning to. She knew where everything was. She grabbed the largest knife from the wall and held it with both hands. Adam crawled through the basement door. Blood ran down his face. His cheek was split where the padlock had struck him. He was breathing hard, harder than she had ever heard him breathe. But his face still looked calm, patient, mildly disappointed, as if she had made a small mistake, and now he had to correct it. "Put that down," he said. "No." He moved toward her. Jennifer backed around the table, keeping it between them. She held the knife up, eyes locked on him. Adam tilted his head, the way he always did when he was trying to read her. "You're not going to use that. I already used the padlock." Something moved across his face. It was not respect. It was something close to it, and somehow worse. Then he flipped the table. It happened so fast, Jennifer barely had time to move. She threw herself sideways as the table crashed into the coffee table, snapping its legs. She hit the floor hard, and the knife slid across the tile toward Adam. He picked it up. Then he walked toward her. "Do you see what you made me do?" he shouted. It was the first time she had ever heard him raise his voice. Jennifer grabbed a broken piece of the coffee table and swung it into his knees. Adam stumbled. She jumped up and ran into the kitchen. The pan was still on the stove. She grabbed it with both hands. The handle burned her palm, but she did not let go. She turned just as Adam stood over her. Jennifer swung the pan as hard as she could into his face. Adam fell. His head struck the edge of the table on the way down with a horrible cracking sound. Blood spread across the floor around him. He did not get up. Jennifer stood over him, shaking. Tears ran down her face. The pan fell from her hands and clattered loudly against the tile. Then she saw the knife near his body. She picked it up. She stabbed him again and again until her arms could barely move. Sweat, blood, and tears covered her. She sat on top of him, staring down at what was left of his bruised and bloody face. A feeling moved through her that she had no name for and never wanted to name. Several minutes passed. At last, she stood. The kitchen was silent. She picked up the pan and placed it back on the burner, where it belonged. She did not know why. Then she went to find the telephone. Her hands shook as she dialed. When the person on the other end answered, Jennifer's voice was low and empty. "I need you to come to Adam's house. Don't ask me anything. Come now. Jenny, are you hurt?" Jennifer said nothing. "Please," she whispered. "I'm coming." The line went silent. Story 4. I was driving a rented Ford along Interstate 10 in Texas when everything started to feel wrong. It was a little after 3 in the morning, the kind of hour when the road should have been almost empty, with only a few trucks, tired travelers, and long stretches of dark highway. But that night, the interstate looked like something had broken open across the whole state. The World Cup had brought crowds from everywhere. People had flown in, driven in, and poured across the highways like a flood. Every gas station, rest stop, and parking lot seemed packed with cars, buses, vans, and RVs. Some people were sleeping in their vehicles. Others were standing outside in jerseys and face paint, arguing, laughing, or staring at their phones with blank, tired faces. Traffic had backed up for miles for no clear reason. There was no accident that I could see, no road work, no police line, just brake lights stretching into the dark like a red river. I had been on the road for hours, and my eyes were starting to burn. The rental car smelled like old air freshener and fast food from whoever had used it before me. My back hurt, my hands were stiff on the steering wheel, and every few minutes I checked the bag on the passenger seat to make sure it was still there. Inside were the VIP tickets for the semifinals. They were rare, expensive, and almost impossible to get. I had been nervous about carrying them since the moment I picked them up. At first, I told myself I was being stupid. They were just tickets, paper, and a few digital confirmations on my phone. But that night, with the roads packed and the news full of warnings about scams, stolen passes, fake IDs, and angry fans, the tickets felt heavier than they should have. After crawling forward for nearly half an hour, I saw the sign for a gas station up ahead. It was small and plain, sitting off the highway with only 2 working lights over the pumps. The rest of the place was swallowed by darkness. I almost drove past it, but my fuel gauge was low, and I needed coffee badly enough to ignore the uneasy feeling in my stomach. The lot was crowded, but strangely quiet. Cars were parked at odd angles, like people had pulled in quickly and then lost the energy to leave. A few families sat inside their vehicles with the doors locked. A group of men stood near one pump, speaking in low voices. Nobody was laughing. Nobody was playing music. For a place full of people during a major sports event, it felt more like a waiting room outside a hospital. I parked near the side of the building and locked the car twice before going in. The store looked as tired as I felt. Half the shelves were empty. There were crushed snack bags on the floor. One freezer was humming too loudly, and the coffee machine had a handwritten sign taped to it that said, "Out of order." The air smelled like old mop water, burnt coffee, and hot plastic. Behind the counter stood a young clerk, probably in his 20s. He was pale, with dark circles under his eyes, and his hands kept moving as if he did not know what to do with them. I grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of gum because I felt strange walking in and buying nothing. When I reached the counter, the clerk looked past me toward the windows. His eyes were wide. "You traveling west?" he asked quietly. I nodded, trying to. He leaned closer, his voice dropping so low I could barely hear him over the buzzing lights. "Don't stop at any rest areas before the next city," he said. "Not for gas, not for food, not for sleep. Just keep driving." I stared at him. "Why?" He swallowed. "There are people out there pretending to be highway patrol. Some are wearing vests, some have fake lights on their trucks. They're stopping travelers, taking bags, phones, tickets, anything they think has value." I gave a small, nervous laugh because I did not know what else to do. "That sounds like a rumor." His face did not change. I wish it was. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then his eyes moved again toward the windows, and I followed his gaze. Outside, beyond the pumps, near the dark edge of the lot, a black pickup truck sat with its engine running. I could not see the driver. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like painted glass. The clerk pushed my water and gum toward me. "You should go," he whispered. I left the store feeling colder than before. I tried to tell myself the clerk was just scared. Maybe the crowds had made everyone jumpy. Maybe he had heard too many stories from too many tired drivers. Still, I walked fast, keeping my keys between my fingers. When I reached the rental car, I saw it. My front tire had been cut. It was not flat because of a nail or a piece of glass. It had a long, clean slash across the side. Almost too perfect. Someone had done it with a blade. Someone had walked up while I was inside that store and cut my tire on purpose. For a moment, I just stood there, unable to move. My heart began beating so hard it hurt. I looked around the lot. Nobody seemed to be watching me, but I could feel it anyway. That heavy feeling of eyes on the back of my neck. Then I saw the black pickup again. It was still parked near the edge of the lot, facing my car. No plates, no lights except a soft glow from the dashboard. The engine gave a low, steady hum. Nobody stepped out. Nobody waved. Nobody even moved. But I knew deep in my bones that whoever was inside had been waiting for me to notice the tire. My hands shook as I opened the trunk and searched for the emergency kit. The rental car had a cheap patch kit, a small pump, and a flashlight that flickered every time I moved it. I crouched beside the tire and worked as fast as I could. Every sound made me jump. A car door closing. A cough near the pumps. The distant shout of someone arguing on the highway. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting the men from the truck to come walking toward me. They didn't. That made it worse. They just watched. After what felt like forever, I got enough air into the tire to move. I threw the kit back into the trunk, climbed into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and pulled out of the gas station without looking back. For the first few miles, I drove too fast. My breathing was rough, and my palms were wet against the wheel. I kept telling myself to calm down. I told myself the pickup would stay behind. I told myself I was imagining the whole thing. Then headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. Not close enough to force me off the road. Not far enough to be normal. The black pickup followed at the exact same distance, as if tied to my car by an invisible rope. When I sped up, it sped up. When traffic slowed, it slowed. It never tried to pass. It never flashed its lights. It just stayed there, patient and steady. My phone kept buzzing in the cup holder. At first I ignored it, but the alerts came again and again. Notifications from the World Cup ticketing app. Security warnings. Login attempts. Messages about fan data being exposed in the area. Warnings to change passwords. Warnings about fake Wi-Fi networks. Warnings about stolen digital passes. Each alert made my stomach twist tighter. I remembered all the places I had connected to Wi-Fi during the day. The airport, a coffee shop, a hotel lobby where I had stopped to use the restroom. Then, the gas station. I had not thought much about it. Everyone used public Wi-Fi while traveling. But now, with that truck behind me and those tickets in my bag, it felt like my phone had turned against me. Like it was no longer just a phone, but a signal flare telling someone exactly where I was and exactly what I had. I tried calling the rental company, but the call failed. I tried calling a friend, but the line would not connect. The signal bars jumped from 2 to 1 to nothing. My GPS kept rerouting me, then freezing, then showing roads that were not there. The map spun in circles like it had lost its mind. The traffic finally thinned after an hour, but that did not make me feel safer. The open road only made the truck easier to see. Its high beams burned into my rearview mirror, turning every shadow inside my car sharp and pale. My eyes hurt from checking the mirror again and again. I knew I could not keep driving forever. The patched tire was not safe. My phone was almost dead. I had no idea where the next real city was. Then, through the dark, I saw a faded sign for a roadside motel. It looked old, the kind of place people only stop at when they have no better choice. The sign buzzed in red and yellow with several letters burned out. The building sat back from the road behind a cracked parking lot. A few cars were parked outside, but most of the rooms looked dark. I pulled in because I needed to get off the highway. I thought maybe if I went inside, locked myself in a room, and called for help from a landline, I could lose the truck. The lobby smelled like mildew, old carpet, and something rotten under the floorboards. A small television sat in the corner, blasting a World Cup replay at a volume that made my teeth hurt. The sound of cheering crowds filled the room, too loud and too cheerful for a place that felt so dead. An old woman sat behind the desk. She did not look up when I entered. Her thin gray hair was pinned back, and her eyes stayed fixed on the TV screen. "Need a room," I said. She slowly turned her head toward me. Her face was blank, but her eyes were sharp. Too sharp. "Cash only," she said. I paid without arguing. She gave me a key with a plastic tag and told me my room was on the second floor at the end of the walkway. Her fingers were cold when they brushed mine. I hurried back outside. As I climbed the stairs, I looked toward the road. For a second, I saw nothing. Then the black pickup rolled into the lot. My body went numb. I reached my room, shoved the key into the lock, and got inside as quickly as I could. The room was small and ugly, with stained carpet, brown curtains, and a bedspread that smelled like dust. I locked the door, slid the chain into place, and pushed the small table against it. Then I dragged a chair and the TV stand over too. It was not much, but it was something. I turned off the lights and stood by the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to see out. The pickup stopped near the middle of the lot. Two men got out. They were wearing high-visibility work vests, like road workers or emergency staff. But nothing about them looked official. Their movements were calm and practiced. One of them lifted his vest, and I saw the shape of a gun tucked under it. They did not go to the office. They did not check in. They walked straight to the cars in the parking lot. One by one, they started smashing windows. The sound was horrible. Glass breaking in the dark, car alarms chirping weakly, then dying. They opened trunks, pulled out bags, threw clothes onto the ground, checked glove boxes, searched under seats. They were not stealing randomly. They were looking for something. Then one of them stopped and turned his head toward the second floor, toward my room. I dropped to the floor, pressing my back against the bed. My phone was in my hand, the battery warning glowing red. I tried to call 911, but the call would not go through. No service. I held the phone up, moved toward the window, then back toward the door, as if one corner of the room might save me. Outside, footsteps climbed the wooden stairs. Slow, heavy, certain, they stopped outside my door. No knock came. That silence was worse than any shouting could have been. Then I heard metal slide into the lock. A key. A master key. My blood turned cold. The old woman at the desk had given them access. Maybe she had called them. Maybe she was part of it. Maybe the whole motel was built for this exact moment. The key turned. I grabbed the only thing I could find, a dull butter knife from a tray near the microwave. It felt useless in my hand. I crouched behind the furniture, pressed against the door, barely breathing. Then my phone rang. The sound was so loud in the dark room that I nearly dropped it. A text message flashed on the screen from an unknown number. Do not open the door. Call 911 even if you have no service. Your phone will still try to send your location. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Who had sent it? The clerk? Another traveler? Someone watching the motel? I did not know. I did not have time to know. I dialed 911 again. The call screen appeared, trying to connect. At the same moment, the deadbolt gave way. The men slammed into the door. The table and chair scraped across the carpet, but they held for a second. The door opened only a few inches before hitting the furniture. A hand reached through the gap, fingers searching in the dark. We know you have the tickets. One of them shouted. Give them to us, and you walk out alive. I froze. Tickets. They knew. This was not bad luck. This was not a random robbery. They had followed me because of the VIP tickets. Somehow, they had tracked my phone. The public Wi-Fi, the app alerts, the fake networks, the security warnings. It all connected at once in my head. They were not common thieves. They were organized. They knew which travelers had valuable passes, which cars they drove, where they stopped, and when they were scared enough to make mistakes. The door slammed again, harder this time. The chair cracked. The table shifted. I ran to the back window. It was painted shut, but panic gave me strength. I hit the frame with a butter knife, then with the lamp. Glass cracked. I wrapped my arm in the bedspread and cleared enough of it to climb through. Cold night air hit my face. Outside the window was a low roof over the first floor rooms. I dropped onto it hard, pain shooting through my ankle, but I kept moving. Behind me, the door burst open. A man shouted. Another yelled from the walkway. I ran across the roof, slipping on dust and loose gravel. I could hear them coming after me. The TV in the lobby was still blasting crowd noise, thousands of people cheering while I ran for my life. At the far edge of the roof, I jumped down near the back of the motel and stumbled toward the woods. The trees behind the building were thick and black. There was no moonlight under them, only branches, dirt, and darkness. I ran anyway. I did not care where I was going. I only knew I had to get away from the motel, away from the truck, away from those men and the old woman watching the game like nothing was happening. My phone buzzed again in my hand, but I did not look. Branches scratched my face. My bad ankle burned. Behind me, I heard voices and the crackle of leaves under boots. Then the ground disappeared. I fell hard. For one breathless second, there was only air and darkness. Then I hit the bottom of something deep and narrow. Pain exploded through my side. My phone flew from my hand and landed a few feet away, screen still glowing. I tried to stand, but my leg folded under me. I looked up and saw the opening above, a rough circle of black sky framed by dirt and roots. It was too high to climb. The walls were steep and loose. Every time I grabbed at them, the dirt broke apart in my hands. Then I smelled smoke. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Then I turned and saw the shape beside me. A burned car. It sat half buried at the bottom of the pit, its frame black and twisted. The windows were gone. The seats were nothing but metal springs and ash. Around it were things that did not belong in the woods. Suitcases, shoes, melted phone cases, a child's backpack, a passport cover, a cracked camera, clothes covered in dirt and soot. My mind went quiet. This was not the first time. This pit was not an accident. It was not some old hole behind a motel. It was where they brought people when they were done with them. Travelers, fans, families, anyone carrying something worth taking. The motel was not a safe place. It was not even a business in the way I had thought. It was a trap, a slaughterhouse, dressed up as a roadside stop. Footsteps came to the edge above me. I pressed myself against the dirt wall, though there was nowhere to hide. Two dark shapes stood over the pit. I could not see their faces, only the shine of their vests and the pale blur of their hands. One of them laughed softly. Then I heard liquid splashing down. The smell hit me a second later. Gasoline, it poured over the dirt, over the burned car, over the scattered bags and clothes. Some of it splashed near my shoes. My throat closed. I tried to scream, but only a weak sound came out. My phone lay on the ground, the screen cracked, but still alive. The signal showed one tiny bar fading in and out. I crawled toward it, dragging my injured leg behind me. My fingers were slick with dirt and blood. I opened my notes, the last thing I had typed. The story of what had happened from the gas station to the motel to the pit. I hit send. For a moment, nothing happened. The loading circle spun. Above me, someone struck a lighter. A small flame appeared in the dark, bright and calm and terrible. The signal flickered. The upload bar moved a little, then a little more. I do not know if it went through. I do not know if anyone will find this. I do not know if the police will ever dig behind that motel, or if the old woman will keep watching her games while more travelers check in and never check out. But if you are reading this, listen to me. Do not stop at that motel. Do not trust the fake patrol trucks. Do not connect your phone to strange Wi-Fi. And if you are driving through Texas in the middle of the night with something valuable in your bag, keep going until the sun comes up. Because for them, the game never ended. The lighter fell. And now all I can see is fire. Story 5. I am tired of this whole thing. Every year it is the same routine. I have to stand in the middle of the town park and act like the kids' Easter egg hunt is the biggest, most important competition in the world. I work for the park department, and for some reason the town turns this little event into a full production every spring. Parents show up with cameras, kids run around like they are hunting treasure, and I get stuck pretending I care who found the most plastic eggs filled with cheap candy. To be fair, it was not the worst job I had ever done. The weather was beautiful that day. The sky was clear, the grass was bright green, and the air smelled like flowers and fresh dirt. It was better than unclogging park toilets, scraping gum from picnic tables, or cleaning soda from the floor of the office. But still, it was boring. There are only so many times you can watch children scream over jelly beans before your soul starts to leave your body. When the hunt finally ended, I walked to the center of the park and rang the little brass bell we used every year. The sound carried across the playground, past the picnic shelters, and into the open field where the kids had been running around for the last hour. Almost at once, dozens of children came rushing toward me like a tiny, loud army. They were holding plastic buckets, grocery bags, Easter baskets, and even one old pillowcase. Candy wrappers were already stuck to some of their fingers. A few of them were breathing hard like they had just finished a marathon. I cleared my throat and put on the same fake cheerful voice I used every year. All right, kids. I need everyone in a line so we can count the eggs properly. Be patient, please. We'll get through everybody. That was when I heard Terrence from somewhere near the back. Terrence was the mayor's son, and I had never liked him. He was the kind of kid who talked to adults like he already owned the town. He always had a runny nose, always had something sticky on his hands, and always looked like he wanted to start a fight just because he could get away with it. You guys are so screwed, he said, sniffing loudly. I got the best egg. It has to count for like 50 or something. I took a slow breath and forced myself to smile. Well, Terrence, if it's so special, why don't you go to the back of the line? We'll see what everybody else has first, and then we'll look at yours. He sucked his snot back into his nose and dragged his basket behind him as he walked past me. Yeah, whatever, lawn boy. If it would not have landed me in prison, I would have smacked that kid right there in front of the Easter decorations. The other kids had done pretty well. One little boy had almost 30 eggs in his bucket, and he looked like he was ready to pass out from pride. A girl in pink boots had found 26. A pair of twins had clearly cheated by sharing eggs, but their mother was watching me like she wanted me to say something, so I let it go. None of this mattered anyway. There was no grand prize, no trophy, no cash, just the joy of saying you won an Easter egg hunt in a town where the most exciting thing that had happened all month was a broken traffic light near the grocery store. Then we got to Terrence. Of course, he had more than everyone else. 43 eggs. That was already enough to win by a lot. I was not surprised. His parents hated seeing him lose, and I would have bet my paycheck that Mayor Reynolds or his wife had bought extra eggs from the store and slipped them into his basket when nobody was looking. I was not going to start a fight about it, because arguing with the mayor over plastic eggs was not how I wanted to spend my afternoon. But when I reached the bottom of his basket, under all the bright plastic junk, I saw something that did not belong. It was a real egg, not one of ours. not plastic, not painted. A real egg, about the size of a large chicken egg, but wrong in every possible way. The shell was black, deep and dull like old charcoal, and it was covered in small white spots. They were not painted on. They looked like part of the shell itself. The egg was also heavier than it should have been. When I picked it up, it sat in my palm like a stone. I looked at Terrence. I'm not counting a bird egg. His face changed at once. His lower lip pushed out. His eyes watered. Then he opened his mouth and screamed like I had stolen his inheritance. Dad. He said he won't count it. Before I could say anything else, Mayor Reynolds was already walking toward me. He moved fast for a man who usually acted like the whole town should slow down and make room for him. He had that fake smile on his face, the one he used at ribbon cuttings, school events, and every time he wanted someone to do something without making him ask twice. Mr. Sampson, he said, his sweet southern accent hitting me before he even reached us. Can I speak with you for a moment? I sighed. Yes, Mr. Mayor? He looked down at the egg in my hand, then back at me. Now, an egg is an egg, isn't it? Why don't you just count it? In fact, it looks pretty special. Why not count it as 10? Mayor Reynolds was the kind of man who would pay for groceries in pennies just to ruin a cashier's day. He wore nice shirts, shook hands too hard, and acted friendly until the second someone told him no. Sir, I said carefully, you have to understand, I don't even know what this is. His smile dropped just enough for me to see the real man underneath. Just count it as 10. I looked down at the egg again. It felt cold, even though it had been sitting in Terrence's basket under the sun. There was something about it that made me want to put it down. I could not explain it. It was just an egg, but my skin crawled while I held it. Very well, sir, I said. I raised my voice for the crowd. Everyone give Terrence a round of applause. He found 63 eggs. The cheers that followed were weak enough to belong at a funeral. Even the kids knew it was stupid. Terrence grinned like he had won the Super Bowl. An older man standing near the back of the crowd leaned toward his wife and said, "That is a strange-looking egg. Must have come from the woods." I kept my smile frozen on my face. "No, sir. I promise it was an extra point egg I hid this morning." "Great job, Terrence." That was a lie, of course. I had not hidden any real eggs, and I had definitely not hidden a black one with white spots. But the mayor was watching me, and I wanted the event to end without him making my life harder than it already was. As Terrence walked by, still glowing with victory, I leaned down and whispered, "Hey, kid, where did you find this one anyway?" He looked up at me with that smug little face. "By the trees, dumbass." Then he walked away. I stared after him for a second, then looked back at the egg. That was when I noticed the crack. It was thin, almost like a hair, running across one side of the shell. Whatever was inside was probably dead. At least, that was what I told myself. I did not want to think about it too much. I carried it to the trash can near the walkway and dropped it inside with the rest of the garbage from the event. Then, I finished cleaning up and went home after a long day of pretending to care. The next morning, things stopped being weird and started being a real problem. By the time I clocked in, half the town was already losing its mind. I was not awake enough to understand why. I had slept badly, my back hurt, and I was drinking an energy drink that tasted like someone had mixed sugar with battery acid. I stepped out of the office, took one long swallow, and then saw it. A sinkhole had opened in the park. Not a small one either. A big, ugly hole had appeared right where the trash can had been the day before. The ground around it had split and sunk inward. Chunks of grass and broken pavement hung over the edge. The trash can itself was down inside the hole, crushed and twisted like someone had stepped on it. 3 police cars were parked around the area, and yellow tape had been stretched in a wide circle, as if yellow tape had ever stopped anything bad from happening. My boss, James, came storming toward me before I even had time to finish processing what I was seeing. His face was already red, and his jaw was tight. "Samson, what happened?" he snapped. I looked at the hole, then at him. "Listen, Bossman, I don't know how to tell you this. I've never been a geologist. But if I had to guess, I took another sip of my drink. Looks like a sinkhole." James stared at me like he wanted to throw me into it. He closed his eyes for a moment and did one of those breathing exercises his wife had taught him. He always did that when he was about to lose his temper. Once some of the red faded from his face, he said, "I meant, why is it here? When did it happen? Do we have any kind of timeline?" "Oh," I said, "then I've got nothing. I just know we need to order a new trash can." I pointed down into the hole, where bits of shredded metal rested in the dirt. James rubbed his forehead. "Reynolds is already on the phone with the county. So if you know anything, now would be a great time to say it. With Mr. Mayor, I think the only great time will be when he drops dead," I muttered. Then, louder, I said, "There wasn't a hole when I left yesterday. There is a hole now. That's all I've got." Right after I said that, the ground gave a soft rumble. It was not loud, but I felt it through my shoes. The edge of the hole crumbled and slid inward by a few inches. Dirt fell down the sides. The crushed trash can shifted deeper with a metallic scrape. James's phone buzzed in his pocket. He looked at the screen and sighed like a man about to walk into a beating. "Samson, go check the camera feed," he said. "I need to go get yelled at by the mayor." So I went back into the office. The place smelled like stale coffee, old paper, and bad decisions. Carrie was sitting behind the counter, a bored 16-year-old seasonal worker who always looked like she had better places to be, even though I knew she did not. A little cloud of vape smoke drifted out of her mouth as she glanced up from her phone. "Hey, Carrie," I said, "I need to check the cameras. Go outside and tell people the park is closed. Try not to sound stupid while you do it." She rolled her eyes. "Do I have to?" "Yes, and stop vaping in here." "Doubt you'll see anything," she said, getting up slowly. "The feed cut out like 1,000,000 times last night. Keep rolling your eyes, Carrie. Maybe you'll find a brain back there." She rolled them again, of course, and dragged herself outside. I went into the back room, where the security monitor sat on a dusty desk beside a chair that felt like it had been designed by someone who hated spines. The camera feed was always bad. Hazy, gray, and full of static. Still, I was going to do my job, or at least look like it. Carrie was right. Most of the night was nothing but static. I clicked through the footage and saw snow, gray lines, and empty darkness. Every now and then the image was cleared just enough to show the sidewalk, grass, and the trash can sitting exactly where it should be. Then the static returned. I watched for what felt like hours. At one point, I had to get another image from the breakdown just to keep my eye. I was almost ready to give up when something strange. Part of the footage I had already watched 3 times suddenly looked different. First, it was the static. Then, the image cleared. The trash can was sitting on the sidewalk, lone and pale glow of heartbreak. Nothing moved around. No people, no animals, no wind. Then there was a triple flash. It filled the screen for less than a second, like someone had turned on a strange light on the ground. Then, the trash screenplay shook. Not wild, shake, violent, and bounced against the sidewalk with something inside it trying to pull it free. For almost 2 minutes, the can rattled, jumped in place. Then, it stuck.